came here in 1986 to run it for myself in October. I signed the papers and I was owner of the Red Barn Incorporated. People come in here for the experience, more so than I think anything else. And they love the fact that somebody's actually taking the time to listen. Find that balance between doing what you love that isn't really work, that might pay the bills, and more importantly, can resonate with people and actually to some extent help people. That's pretty rewarding. Without my customers, I would be doing what I don't love, guaranteed.
Yeah. Call this meeting to order. We'll begin with a roll call, please.
Ray Karen?
Here.
Ken Fletcher?
Here.
Jerry Kieran?
Yes.
Steve Russell?
Yes.
Ben Twitchell?
Here.
Jeff West? Patricia West? Here.
Recite the pledge of allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ray, I'm right angle and I can't see it.
So you can remember my name.
I don't know who that is.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of
So
January's
moved.
2 and 8.
Second.
Been moved and second. Any discussion, omissions? If not, all in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Passes. Under communications, do we have a Jim Dinkle here? Hi, would you step up to the mic, please, and tell us what you're about?
Well, perfect timing. I just walked in the door. So, my name is Jim Dinkle. For the record, I reside at 106 Nye Corner Road in Fairfield. And I want to thank the council, the clerk, and others who've invited me to introduce myself here in Winslow this evening. As of November 6th, I became the executive director of First Park in Oakland. And my background is in economic development, about 20 years experience at the state, county, and municipal levels in that field. My experience includes serving a Kentucky governor. I was the first in the nation brownfields manager for the city of Chicago, administrating a $55 million guaranteed loan from HUD to remediate environmentally contaminated properties and put them back into reuse. I moved here from central Arizona, from Mesa, and I am a native of Lexington, Kentucky, hence my southern accent. It's not an Arizona accent. Though I have been to Winslow, Arizona, I will tell you. There was some confusion on the part of some friends where I was going tonight. For anybody who's familiar with First Park, I would kind of like to reintroduce it to you for a few moments. First of all, it is at the northwest corner of Interstate 95 and Kennedy Memorial Drive, straddling Oakland and Waterville. The gateway to the park is located between Aubuchon Hardware and Haskell Ford Lincoln. The park currently employs around 800 people, and we're very proud that the second largest employer in the entire region is housed within the park, and of course that's T-Mobile. Other owners within the park include LL Bean, the accounting firm Perry, Fitz, Boulay, and Fitton, as well as Maine General Hospital. First Park was originally 285 acres. Today it's about 200 acres, and there remain about 17 lots for sale or lease in the park. An economic impact analysis was once conducted on the park, probably within the past 10 years, estimating that upon full build-out it can employ as many as 4,000 people. The town of Winslow, I want to cite too, is represented on our General Assembly by Howard Mehta. I don't see Howard here this evening, but Howard is our past immediate board president and remains a member of our executive board. As well, Jerry, how do you pronounce your last name? Kirian. Jerry is one of the representatives, as well as Ken Fletcher, who's the alternate. So we appreciate their service. The next meeting of the General Assembly will be next Thursday, which is the 22nd. I guess I should report several things we've started since November 6th when I began. We've ordered appraisals on the property. We'll commence with those in May to get an up-to-date price on the value of the lots, or a cumulative price if some developer, for example, was to come in and buy all of the lots. Our website is another sticking point. It badly needs refreshing. We have contracted with Nancy Marshall, Public Relations in Augusta, and the work is commencing this week on a website that is user-friendlier to site selectors, developers, brokers, real estate professionals, and others with interest. We are targeting site selectors and real estate decision makers throughout the United States to consider First Park in Central Maine for startups, business expansions, or relocations. I'll soon be traveling to 2 locations outside of Maine to present details about First Park and what's developing within its boundaries. Every Friday we issue a First Park update, which with the clerk's permission, if you could provide me the email addresses, or I can just send you the update and you can disseminate it maybe every Friday to the council members. We've been doing this for several months, and again, I think we're improving communications through this update that literally comes from my desk every Friday afternoon. First Park installed new officers in June. That was before I started, but presently Mike Roy, the city manager of Waterville, is our president. He succeeded Howard. Steve Monselik from Redfield is vice president, so he'll be the incoming president in 2019. James Jurdak from Oakland is our treasurer. Doug Yulee from Sydney is our assistant treasurer. Peter Mills from Cornville is the secretary clerk. And as I said, Howard is the past immediate president. Financially speaking, First Park projects adequate cash flow for operations and debt service through the coming fiscal year, and without additional borrowing or any increase to municipal assessments. Our municipal assessments, by the way, have remained unchanged since 2007 at $587,000. Annual revenue distributions to member communities this past year totaled $260,000, and so that you know, our audited financial statements are available in the town manager's office here in Winslow. So that's a quick summary of what's developing at First Park, and I would welcome any questions or comments or insights that you have. I would appreciate it.
General Assembly meeting, where?
At T-Mobile, in their conference room at 5 p.m. On the 22nd, and a light meal will be served.
If I may, through the chair,
Sure.
I know that Maine General vacated a few buildings. Have you been able to fill those buildings?
We've not, although I did learn last week that there was a new, I think it was a podiatrist had moved into one of the spaces that it was vacant. So that was and there was actually another specialty doctor, and I can't recall his specialty, who had taken another. So I guess individually they're slowly leasing, is my understanding.
There were a lot of restrictions on the land, as well as the development to make it a more campus feel.
Yes.
Which didn't end up working because we still have many lots available. Are you going to be looking at that to possibly make some changes to it?
We've actually submitted our covenants, our restrictive covenants, to the Department of Environmental Protection as well as another state agency. So we are loosening those restrictions, yes.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions?
And I do mention the Department of Environmental Protection because the lots are pre-permitted, so they're shovel-ready, arguably. So again, we didn't want to make changes or revisions to the covenants without making sure we weren't disturbing the shovel readiness of the sites. So.
All set? Thank you.
Thank you. Anytime, I welcome the opportunity to come back.
Continuing on to communications, we now have a public comment period. If anybody would like to step up to the mic and speak on any issue that they like, they are welcome to do so now. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Chad Bell, 28 Smiley Avenue, right here in Winslow. I wanted to speak just in support of Amanda McCaslin, our Parks and Rec Director. I serve on the rec board for the town, and over the past, how long have you been here? Year and a half? Year and a half. Amanda has already stepped in and improve the programming that we have. And not just for the young children that my children are able to take part of, but for the older community as well. Providing things like volleyball, different, I think she had at one point somebody come in and talk about aromatherapy, and she's always trying to find things. My concern is if we don't make her full-time and do what's right by the community and as well as Amanda, we're going to end up losing her. And I think in the 5 years I've been in town, Amanda is the 4th person that we've had in that position. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak?
Clarification, of course, there was a request at the building committee meeting as far as having a brief presentation about the building plans.
Yep.
So I assume this is the time you wanted, since
Well,
there's nothing on the agenda to that.
Coming up is reports of committees and commissions, and we thought maybe we would do your report under the report of committees.
Okay.
If that's okay. It's coming right up probably, right after the town manager's report. Does anybody else like to speak? If not, we'll move on. And we have to start with appoint 2 councilors to the KV cog. Does that mean people are turned out, or
Yes.
how does that work? And so,
2-year term.
who's on it right now? Who's just
Ben
passed?
and Ray.
Ben and Ray. And we need 2 more, or those 2 get reappointed? What do you guys wanna do?
If I might.
Yeah?
Ray has no intention of continuing serving on the K board. The meetings are just during the day, and they're always during the day. It makes it very difficult to get out of work, and sometimes they're very far, and
Yep.
it just wasn't a good fit. It seemed at the time it was a good fit, but it just wasn't. It isn't. So if I served, I probably wouldn't be able to serve well.
Appreciate
so.
that. Yep. Do you still wanna serve, Ben?
Yeah.
And does anybody else wanna volunteer? Jerry?
Well, being retired, I'm able to do it.
Right in the middle of the night, huh?
Yeah.
Is that acceptable to everybody? Do we have to do an affirmation vote or motion or anything, or just show of hands, all in favor of Ben and Jerry? Don't make any ice cream.
One on to 9:30.
Thank you, guys, appreciate that.
No.
Okay, reports of committees and commissions will begin with the town manager's report.
I just had a couple of things. First of all, attached to my report was a proposed budget schedule, and I didn't hear from anyone, so I hope that's okay. And the other things I'll be discussing, and when we get into reports of committees and commissions, I do want to talk about the MSW committee report, and hopefully getting some direction from the council on that. So then finally, I'll just add, I put in my report that it's my intention when I present the 2019 budget that I'm gonna propose that our Parks and Rec director become a full-time position. That happens to be something that I've been wanting to do for a number of years, and unfortunately, just never seemed like a good time to do that, so I put it in the budget for this year. And of course, we'll be talking about that when we do the budget preparation. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Does anybody have any questions for Mike? In his report? No. Okay, we'll move on to department reports. I assume those are all fine, so I guess we'll go right to the committees then and let the building committee go ahead and speak. So who have you guys designated to start with? And
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about the work the building committee has done over the last 4 or 5 months since the failure of the November bond for 10.3. You asked for and received a joint meeting with the Winslow School Board to talk about the failed bond and what you would like to see and what your thoughts and perceptions were in regards to why it failed. One of the things you asked us to do was to fully vet the K-8 option, that you felt very strongly that that had not been properly vetted and that there were a lot of people that still thought that might be the best option. So we've done that. You asked us to come in with a number for improvements in this bond And even though we all know it wasn't a definitive number, there was a pin dropped in the ground, to use Ken's phrase, which I liked, which is we got to have some pin in the ground to at least know what we're looking at, of coming in with a bond request of 7.83. So we sent those directions back to the building committee. We sent the request for a properly vetted K-8, and Mike, I thought you made that point quite clear and well in the meetings, that we needed to see a budget and we needed to see schematics for the K-8 as well as any other option that we wanted to consider. And so I have that for you in these handouts that are coming out. And then we looked at two other options, one being a 712 configuration with a much smaller auditorium. And then we looked at a 712 with no auditorium, but teaching space added for the visual and performing arts, because we don't have enough room without having at least some sort of an auditorium. We don't have enough teaching space right now to bring the 7th and 8th graders into the high school. So, if you look at the handout that's coming around, the first option you see is the K-8 option. That's the budget for it. I know we have a lot of people that want to speak tonight, so I'm not going to read you those numbers. You can certainly ask questions. So the first page is the 9.615 option for a K-8. The second page is a schematic for that. And you can see what that really amounts to is a wing, a 2-story wing being added to the elementary, and some other renovations being done to the K-8, including a vastly expanded parking lot, which you could see on the next schematic. Parking, as you probably know, in the Winslow Elementary School is very difficult now with K-5 students, along with the number of buses, of course, that come and go every day. So parking was a huge issue if you're going to bring 3 more classes over there. And then we had an interesting exercise that one of our board members suggested, which I think worked out really well, which is let's talk about each option before we vote on which option we would recommend to the board. And I guess that's the other point I'd like to make clear is this is kind of happening in reverse order. We haven't presented the recommendation to the board. The board chair does also chair the building committee, so I feel comfortable that the board's aware of what option the building committee is going to make to them. But typically, we would make this recommendation to the board. The board would either accept it or not accept it, and they would then, in turn, bring their recommendation to you. So, but this option of pros and cons is, you know, the K-8 option, this is what the committee came up for pros on the left-hand column, and then what were the cons on the right-hand column for K-8. And, of course, the number one was cost. But, again, I won't read those to you. Turn the page. You're going to go to the next option, which we looked at, which is a 712 configuration, but no auditorium, but added teaching space. And if you turn the page, you'll see that the added teaching space is blocked out from the end of the high school towards what is now the junior high school. That is the cheapest option, 7.5. And then you turn the page and you'll see the 712 with a much smaller auditorium. As a matter of fact, it was about $1 million savings from the first bond request in the auditorium, reducing the size of it to 400 and I think it's 20 seats now, as opposed to the 600 that we were looking at before. The schematics of that, which you've seen before, 2 pages of schematics, 3 pages of schematics, 4 pages of schematics, 5 pages? Okay. 5 pages of schematics, and then again, the pro and con sheet. In that it was, these two options were both 712, we put the pros and cons for the 712 at the top, and then without the new auditorium, without the smaller auditorium on the left-hand side, and with the new seat auditorium on the right-hand side. So you can see what the committee thought in regards to what these options are. And lastly, I just want to say to you, we did call for a vote at our last meeting on February 6th, I believe it was. There are 25 members on the building committee. 2 were absent that night. The vote was 23-0 to support the 8.665, which is the smaller auditorium added, which will be a little more costly than obviously the 7.5 with teaching space added, but everyone felt that for the little extra that was a much better option at serving our students and putting ourselves in a good place with a good school facility for the next 25 to 30 years. And I'll gladly take any questions anybody has, but like I said, I know there are lots of people who'd like to
Go
speak.
ahead, Ray.
If I might, and, first of all, thank you for the committee. They did a great work, the subcommittees, unbelievable amount of dedication and detail that went into the preparation for these cost figures and stuff. Eric, could you explain a little bit about the blueprint for keeping the auditorium in the same place and then moving the auditorium, keeping the auditorium in the same place and then adding the additional space kind of prevents from
Right.
from that type of thing, and why some of the reasoning why behind that was.
Yeah, the option, if you take the option with no auditorium but added teaching space, and that's why I pointed out to you where that's going to go, it's going to be added on to the end of the high school towards the what the present junior high school is, which would interfere with the design of putting an auditorium in at a later date. Several people had talked about, well, maybe we could put the auditorium in later. If you put this teaching space in, it makes it much more difficult to then put an auditorium in that spot, which is the primary spot that it should be. That's where your performing arts, your visual and performing arts programming is now.
Plus the fact that the existing auditorium in the 8.6 plan is actually being converted into space. So if you did put a new auditorium on at a later date, what would be the purpose of the existing auditorium that's there?
Well, because what we were going to do is redefine it. If we had, the original plan was to redefine that space into teaching space and prep space and lab and work area for drama. That was in the original 10.3. That's what was going to happen to it.
Right,
We even looked at trying to revitalize the 210-seat auditorium that we presently have to see if we could get a little bit more size there, see if they had option. But structurally, that was not possible without huge costs.
I think my point too might be that if we do say wait for the auditorium for a later date, we'd have to put money into any type of proposal for redefining the existing auditorium space, because then you'd have really two auditoriums, and I don't know whether that would be, that to me would be, you would have to redefine the space at some added cost in the future.
Yeah, and we also talked about the cost at a later date versus now. It's as cheap as it's going to be right now. And you'll see in the pros and cons that the 420-seat smaller version auditorium will serve our present programming, expand, and allow us some expansion. But it would be a venue that we would then partially replace what we're losing, which is the auditorium in the present junior high school.
Go ahead, Ken.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, through the chair, how do you want to handle questions going forward? I'm one that likes to write the question down to make
Really,
sure
I
I know
hadn't
what I'm
noticed that.
asking. And in turn, I like to get a written response. And the reason for that, 3 years from now, or 4 years from now, or 5 years from now, I think it's always good to have a written record of this is the information as we do it. How do you want that to work?
I think the way that I would understand it best is if you had your questions vetted through either Mike Hevener working as the town manager or through Steve Russell, the chair.
Okay. With that in mind, if I could, Mr. Chair, learning from the past what worked and what didn't work, I think one of the things we really got to consider is for the school board and the town council to work together to develop a financial plan. Because really, that's what we're talking about from a standpoint of the money. I'm not going to question the education experts on saying this is what we need, but I think we need a comprehensive financial plan. And with that in mind, I've prepared what I think are the most logical questions that we need to address, not just for the building, but for the whole education budget going forward. So I could hand that out now if that's what people want to do. We haven't got to answer the questions, but to really develop the process going forward as to where we can sit down with the school board and the council who wants to set in on that. Of course, it'll be a public meeting, and just really go through some of these factors to make sure we all have the same expectation. Do you think that'd be worthwhile?
Can't do any harm.
There's about 12 or 14 copies of this, so there's more than enough to share.
Just write that one.
Yes, he did. And, you know, if I may, Mr. Chairman, while that's going around, I'll just briefly go through it. I think one of the things we really got to look ahead on is what's the enrollment. The enrollment today, what do we expect 5 years from now, what do we expect 10 years from now? And of course, that's only a forecast, not a guarantee, but I think we do need to have some idea as to how many students we will be there to support. We also need to look at the budget coming up, FY19, because that all gets into the financials, and I know that hasn't been finalized, but I did read in the paper of 6 to 11% increases on the initial. You know that's the initial, but that's all got to be factored in. One of the things I still haven't come to grips with is what is going to be the potential financial impact if we dissolve AOS 92 and actually form a Winslow Administration Department, as I call it. You know, I think we need to understand that because that gets into the financials. Also, at one point, we were talking about the state was going to give us more money back to the education system to support what's called the Service Center Administration Plan, and if that still is going to be there, that could be a good way of offsetting it. We also need to look at what the expected FY19 education state support will be as compared to FY18, and what really are going to be the savings that we can expect to realize through school consolidation. So those are the 6 I suggested. I think that the other thing that we need to consider, last year, as when we were actually considering the 10.3 bond, we heard from our state rep that we were going to get a significant increase in K through 12 education funding. There was talk of restoring municipal revenue sharing, which would help, both, as well as is the state going to actually fund the homestead exemption up to the 100%, which was supposedly going to happen. Now, I can't expect the council or the school committee to answer those questions, but I think that has to be part of what we get our heads around as we put together a financial plan. And I'd appreciate any thoughts or comments at this point, or we can talk about it later.
Okay, well, I think you make some good points, Kevin.
Okay.
Certainly when you do getting a good grip on what the big picture is, so it's important.
Thank you.
Did anybody else want to ask any questions? We're all set. School board members want to- just Joel. Joel, did you want to say anything at all? Did you want to make?
Yeah, I guess I'll have a little to say on it, I think. So as chair of the building committee as well as the school board, obviously, as indicated before, the school board hasn't considered this yet. We will have our meeting on the 26th, for those who don't know that already. So in considering putting the 3 plans together that the building committee did, just to give a little more history on that, the goal to vet out basically the 3 options that seemed apparent that needed to be considered. A lot of work was done. The K-8 being one that had been vetted previously by the study committee versus the building committee, the study committee that preceded the building committee. So there was a fair amount of work that had to be done there. to go down that road because it had been done again by the study committee. So a lot of work was done there. Various options were considered regarding auditorium, as Eric had indicated. Looked at trying to expand within the given box that it is now, for example, to see if we can get more seats in. Again, as he indicated, structurally that was not feasible. We had some high hopes for that option, but didn't really pan out. But in the end, we were hoping we could get to what is we consider to be, the building committee considers to be a comprehensive plan that covers the needs of the school as a whole and the community as a whole, because a lot of this, these schools are our community centers by and large, used for many purposes, both educationally, recreationally, and other means for the town. Trying to get a project that would meet those needs with everybody's needs considered. We were hoping to get closer to the budget that you guys had in mind, so a lot of things were looked at. As you look at the details of the plans, you'll see a number of things that were addressed as far as taking out some square footage on such example as the auxiliary gym being added to some of that storage space. Some of that square footage went away, and we found other places to do storage and changing rooms and other such things too. Money obviously comes down to square footage, and so we did a lot of work on that as a committee as a whole to try to find where we can take some square footage out, reconfigure some things. And I think the committee as a whole did good work on that. While we didn't come in as low we had hoped for a comprehensive plan, it seemed to come around through, and I don't know if Mike's had a chance to run further numbers on that. He had run some numbers by the building committee the other night on what the payments would be, or the first year payment on each of those three plans, and then we kind of roughed out a number on what it would be for the 7.83, and the difference between that and what this plan is came in around about a roughly $65,000 a year difference in payment on the bond, and however it equates to in regards to in comparison to mill rate, that's about 1/10 of a mill from my understanding. Granted, not saying any or however the town had for plans for funding the 7.83, I'm not sure how much was mill rate and how much was other savings and bonds and other such things, I'm not sure, but it kind of put it into perspective anyway, that 1/10. While the 8.6 sounds like a lot compared to the 7.83, the difference of that 1/10 to make a comprehensive plan seemed like a pretty close draw to try to get to a plan that served the needs of the town for the long term. So hopefully it meets that goal. That was our intention, and as considerations go forward, that's what we were trying to do. So hopefully we met those needs as best we could. So take questions the best I can answer them right now.
Does anybody have any questions?
You have a good, Mr. Chairman, I'll put you on the spot, Joel. And
Do it again.
I just put this together so it didn't get a chance to go out beforehand, but at least conceptually, do you support the idea of the town council, a portion or all of the town council working with the school committee to put together this financial plan to incorporate the consolidation as well as look at the other factors, including year-to-year increases and cost savings and AOS administration?
Well, we're going to obviously be talking about those things with our budget, so I think that's going to happen as part of that discussion. I think regarding this plan, while there are a number of considerations that you bring up in your questions you bring here as far as state funding and other such things, while they're all good legitimate questions, it doesn't negate our need to do something with the building. So, you know, I don't know, you know, how we're, you know, we're open to talking about things, but, you know, we have to do something with our building. So I'm not sure what your goals were for the 7.83 that you planned originally and how that was to be funded. So that's something, I guess, that, you know, we're not aware of what your plans are there as a council. So when you made that
Good, Mr.
consideration.
Chairman, just to add, you know, add the clarity. You know, I can't speak for the whole council, but I can speak for myself. I think we all agree that we need to consolidate because we've got a junior high that's very expensive, too big, and we
Right.
can't afford to keep doing what we're doing. So I don't think that's both from an educational standpoint as well as a financial standpoint. But the thing I would suggest, I think this could be a very good opportunity for the school committee and the town council to work together to really put together that financial plan that incorporates the consolidation, but also looks at the other factors which affect the budget. And just to see if we can all come to a common understanding as to what the expectations are going forward. So that's the intent of it. It's not to supersede anything, but to really exchange information.
Yeah. And we do have a meeting together scheduled 25th, is that correct?
No, I think it's
In
March 8th, isn't it?
March 8th.
Yes.
March 8th, okay. So I guess we'll be having conversations then,
Good.
I guess, and we'll see what we are.
Good, thank you.
So,
Does anybody else have any questions? Go ahead.
I guess I guess I am a little concerned about overall being too aggressive or just overall holding, you know, one section up for other sections. We can, obviously gonna have discussions on all parts of the budget. AOS, the normal school budget, plus this building committee, structural, you know, plan for that. And I think I always myself would prefer to compartmentalize the issue. Is this is one issue and we have to make fiscal responsibility as part of it, and the separate issues. But if, I'm concerned that we're gonna maybe tackle too much if we decide to go after, you know what I mean, everything and look at it and talk about everything at one meeting, including this. I think we have to be a little careful about that. That's just my feeling.
well, I think, I don't disagree with you. I think, although there seems to be a lot on the plate, I think going back to like the Parks and Rec director, I think some things are never a good time, that you can never find a good time where you've got extra money here, there, or wherever. I think those days are long gone.
I think,
But you know, there are certain things that need to happen, and you know, and hopefully we can find a ground that we can all agree upon.
you know, the questions are great. I don't think we're gonna have some of the answers to the questions until, you know what, the end of the summer, when, you know, or close to the end of the summer. We don't even have some by the time we pass the budget. It's unknown, some things, and so I don't think we'll have some unknown. I guess we'll have to have a discussion on the council too as to, you know, what the timeline is at some point in time, because the building is, if, you know, is falling apart and we have to sink some major money in, we have to have that discussion at some point in time. And so I'm not saying I believe it is urgent, you know, to get something done in a timely fashion, but not, you know, not do due diligence either, but to at least get a path forward on something. What is the council's, through the chair, if I might, are we still trying to get this in a June election?
I think that's the goal. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the goal.
I think that is a good goal, given the increasing costs of construction and interest rates and such, that the
If I might just finish
Sooner
my
we come to a
line
plan,
of
the
thought,
better.
would be at that point in time, when the council discuss these motions at some point in time?
My
Because
understanding,
a lot of people are looking at them for the first time, some aren't, but
You're
will we
talking-
discuss them tonight?
you're talking about this one right here?
Yes, yes, yeah, the
My
proposal
understanding is
tonight.
that this is a proposal that first has to go to the school board.
Yeah.
And the school board has to sign off on it and say, yeah, this is this is the
Okay.
one we agree on.
Okay.
I assume it might be the same one as the building committee, but
Well, there are a number of members that weren't part of the building
Let's
committee,
wait,
so.
let's wait and
And then it
As
comes back.
well as new
and
members
then
to
we'll
the school
discuss
board as
it.
a
I
whole,
would
so.
assume there could
Okay.
be something as early as next March, at the next meeting, the first reading of
Okay.
the bond.
We'll have
of
our
what would be on the
discussion
bond.
then.
I would
Yeah.
presume that we'd be acting
And I-
on this proposal on our meeting on the 26th, so.
And my suggestion would be that at both the first reading and the second reading, perhaps we have public comment. I'm not sure how that would work. We always have a public hearing at the second reading. Maybe it's important that we have it at the first reading too, this time, but go ahead.
Yes, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I just looked ahead at the calendar. And rightly, maybe oversimplistically, this all fits. Because the school committee's gotta get a budget to us by March 29th. When, we're gonna have our first discussion March 8th. The AOS decision will be made by March 13th. The school committee's gonna make their recommendation February 26th. So I would hope that if we act with some degree of due diligence, in March and April, we will reach the conclusions we need to reach to move forward, which in turn fits the June referendum. But I think we do need to have good information, and we need to sit down and put the numbers together, because we do not want to ask people to approve something without giving them the full picture. So I don't think this is, trying to compartmentalize isn't the issue. The issue is we need a financial plan for the education system, including the consolidation. And we need to do it in the next 2 months. That's my thought. Thank you.
Any more questions, comments from the council? We all set?
Does anybody else, everyone else is gonna be able to talk during
Pardon?
Central? Everyone else can talk if they wanna say something about it.
You
I
know,
mean, I know public comment
we-
can go from.
our agenda should go pretty quick after all this with what we have, and so I'm more inclined to allow people to speak if they wish to speak. So if we have to have a larger public comment here right now, anybody can come up and say something. I would, unless you guys object to that.
Well, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I'm assuming that we're gonna have an order, I think it's an order, isn't it?
Be in order, yes.
Yeah,
And that will probably come in a March meeting.
yeah.
We will have the first reading. We can have public comment and hopefully have more questions answered. And then we would have, if we go with normal practice, the second reading in April. So we could have public comment at 2 of those if we wanted to, as well as tonight if people want to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, the only thing I would ask is if people would be brief tonight, because there's gonna be a lot of time in the future, but, yes, go ahead.
I guess I'd just like to remind school people that this was a meeting, as I understood it, for us to bring you the 3 options
Yeah.
so that you'd see the information ahead of time. It's not the night to argue one case versus the other, because the board hasn't taken action on it. I'm very
Exactly.
sensitive to that issue. The board could say no to us. And if they do, we'd spend a lot of time here arguing about an option that
Sure.
is never gonna come to be.
Yeah.
So tonight was to get you the information, let you know what the recommendation has been, let you know that the Winslow Board's gonna act on that recommendation on the 26th, and after that date, you will have a recommendation for the board. And that's when I think people come and bring you the kinds of information and the backgrounds and their perspectives about why this option and not that option. I mean, I'm prepared to do that tonight, but I just
Sure.
don't think this is the time nor the meeting for that.
Okay, I appreciate that, yeah. Just as a, maybe one of Ken's points here, number 6, have you guys delved any deeper into what the savings are gonna be by closing the middle school? I mean, at one time, we had just sort of a rough figure, and you were trying to be careful, you didn't wanna overestimate what the savings were
Correct,
gonna
I
be.
gave you a conservative figure of 250, I did go look at that,
Okay.
and I do believe there's at least another 150,000 of savings. And one of the things that you'll see as a pro in one of those options is, well, both the 712 options, I don't think we can stress enough, and I said this at the last building committee, the value in having a 712 configuration such that teacher certifications overlap.
Right.
We have a K-8 certification, and you have a 712 certification. Generally speaking, your junior high elementary teachers carry a K-8 certification, your high school teachers carry a 712. So that means you've got 7th and 8th graders in the same building that you've got K-8 certification and 712. So the greater likelihood is that you're going to be able to save from natural attrition. You have a math teacher, let's say it's a 7th grade teacher that retires, and you've got, with dwindling populations, you've got a high school math teacher who's got a 7-12, they're gonna be able to assume some of those responsibilities. It's one of the reasons that I was a strong advocate for 7-12 to begin with, so I think we get a much better chance of being able to have attrition losses saved. And I've looked at some numbers about what normal retirement ages would be for people and looked at the numbers, and I believe, again, being conservative, I could add another 150,000 onto that 250 that I originally said.
Very good. We would probably want to see that, you know, listed, so to speak, yeah, as a report. I think that's an important aspect of the consolidation, is how much we're gonna save by only having 2 buildings instead of 3. Is there any more discussion? Are we all set here? Good. Okay, thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Is there opportunity for more public comment?
Yeah, I think I'm always on the side of more rather than less, so if you'd like to come up in a couple minutes. Since you took the time to come to the meeting.
Thank you.
Introduction and...
Mary Morrison, 12 Dixon Terrace. I'm reading from prepared remarks so that I can be brief. As a taxpayer, a senior citizen, a grandmother, and someone who has been active in community endeavors, the proposal to close the junior high and expand the high school and elementary school has my support. In other words, what I've heard of as option 3. Closing a building that has served us well for many years and houses many happy memories may be sad, but the memories live on outside its brick walls. The cost of maintaining the junior high and making it suit today's needs has been an issue for many years and needs to be addressed. This community has always valued activities and projects that benefit our young people. I know, because I chaired or was on committees that built an addition to the high school and a new elementary school, upgraded our parks, built new fields, tennis courts, and a track and other projects. One of the committees was nicknamed the Pie in the Sky Committee because it seemed to dream so big. The lessons learned were that our townspeople value projects that enhance our community and make it a good place to live and raise children. Helping to make these projects happen became a source of pride for many. The parks and athletic facilities continue to draw people of all ages as participants and spectators. That has been equally true of our school auditoriums. Like the fields, the auditoriums enable us to host regional events. We have always enjoyed the support of our community for sports activities, and that is equally true for music and drama. Some of the same things that make sports such a valuable part of our young people's lives hold true for activities that take place in our auditoriums. Teamwork, fair play, a sense of accomplishment and self-worth are but a few. Music, like many sports, can become a lifelong activity. I've seen drama give students a newfound ability and confidence in expressing themselves in front of a group of people. Other students make a career out of music and drama as teachers, coaches, and performers. Some carry skills learned into leisure time roles in community theater or orchestras and bands. Expanding the gym and expanding the auditorium are equally important in my mind. My appreciation goes out to those of you who have served on the committee to bring these proposals before you. They have listened to many points of view and done their best to present you with something that I believe is eminently doable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Appreciate that. Okay. Seeing no others jumping up. We will,
Mr. Chairman, if I could we move on to the USW committee report?
Yeah, we could do that, yeah. You want the summary report, so is that gonna be at the end? Or, we didn't have a spot, we didn't have a spot. Okay, yep, so one more committee report to do before we move on. Do you have a handout?
Yeah, actually, it's in the council packet.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So in the council packet is our report from our MSW Advisory Committee. And as you probably saw looking at the report, we narrowed it down to 3 options as far as curbside collection. Option 1 was basically keep doing what we've been doing. However, I would argue that that option, when compared to option 5, is actually about 58,000 more, because we're looking at potentially hiring 2 new employees in the sewer department. Although it is also 207,000 more than option number 3. So I think really it comes down to 2 options, and that's option number 3 and option number 5. Option number 3 being the mechanized collection of curbside, MSW, and I've listed there the pluses and negatives. Option 3 is the most costly in regards to upfront initial cost. It's over $500,000 just in initial startup costs. The good news is we would get away from two people in the back of the trash truck, which has always concerned me. And we would also eliminate the collection of MSW being an entry-level position in the Public Works Department. Option number 5, although it's more costly than option number 3, it for the most part gets us out of the trash collection business altogether, privatizing, so we don't have any employees engaged in municipal solid waste collection. So I'm interested in the council's perspective on which option.
Well, I guess, go ahead.
Yeah,
you
if
start.
I may, just first of all, the committee met for a long time, so, and a lot of conversations over the last couple of years. And there's a few members, I don't wanna put them on the spot, but I think they should be recognized for serving on the council. And Connie Mitchell, could you stand up, please? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but Connie served. Tanya, could you please, Tanya, could you please sit up? These, and Paul was here for all the meetings too. You don't have to stand up. We know you
We got you
already.
coming
We
later.
know you enough. But I'd like to thank, and Ken and I served on that committee. I'd like to just thank everybody for their input and for being so diligent for such a long period of time. And thank you very much for serving on the committee.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Ken.
Oh, my goodness, Mr. Chairman, as Councilor Karen said, we spent about 2 years in what I call trash talk. Really trying to understand what those options are, what are the pluses and minuses, and I think the committee went through just about every option we could think of, and I think that Mike has laid them out pretty straightforward. Option 1 is just keep doing what we're doing. Same old, it works. We've got 2 people hanging off the back of a truck. They do a great job. But the thought is this time to move beyond that? So if we make the decision we should move beyond that, there are 2 fundamental approaches that appear to be workable or economically sustainable. One of them is that we go to automation, as we call it, which is the idea that you have one driver with a mechanized arm that's actually picking up the trash containers and putting them into collection to put them into the compactor. That technology is proven. There's various options to do that, but the advantage of it is that you have improved the safety as well as the cost. The initial capital cost is much higher because you've got a more sophisticated vehicle, but that moves us in that direction. The other option is that if we decide that we do not want to be in the trash collection business from a standpoint of the town itself, town employees, is we contract that out. And we looked at various options in between, but those are the two that kind of rose to the surface to say this is fundamentally the decision that we need to move forward on. Now, as I said, for those of us that spent 2 years in trash talk, bringing this to the rest of the council at this point could be a little bit confusing. And so what our thought was to begin the conversation and then rely on the council and really the members of the public, so to speak, to say how much more discussion do we need to proceed with, because we need to purchase the truck at some point here, probably within the next month or two, we need to place that order.
Ooh, is it that close?
Yeah,
Is this truck
actually,
coming
as
in?
soon as possible. Our truck now is in the shop.
Right,
We're actually renting a truck
okay.
to do the
Sure,
work.
bought it.
So the old truck is ready to be
Ready to
replaced?
go.
It's ready to be retired.
That the good news in all of this is that as a member of the MRC for 20-odd years, the taxpayers in Winslow have built up a reserve of over $600,000, which will be coming to us probably in August of 2018. So we will have funds available to do whichever option if we do want to go with capital as approach. But we're at that point, and I didn't know the truck was in the garage, but we're at that point, so we need to make a decision.
Where does the recycling fit in with this?
The recycling is there, and principally, and I think Mike outlined that we ran the 6-month pilot of zero sort. And this was bring it up to the library, drop it off, and the expectation was that we were gonna see a decrease in waste. We haven't seen that.
Saw an increase in recycling though, right?
Well, we think so,
Yeah.
but, you know, I mean, it's kinda hard to tell. So I think we need to do more work on recycling. Any of these, other than the option that we looked at of getting a split truck to go to curbside, would not impact recycling. We can still recycle, we
However
can,
we do.
right.
Okay. Okay. Raymond?
I think it's important to know too that this is a drastic change in the way we're going to be collecting trash. First of all, it's going to be mechanized. So what we have to do is, you know, and Ken's absolutely right, is that we get a lump sum, you know, from PERC that we can use for this initial capital investment that we're going to have, because everybody's going to have a certain container, size container. There's two size containers usually that go with the mechanized thing. The advantage also of the mechanized is that 2 people that we currently have on the back of the truck now can be used for other needs that are very strong needs within the Public Works Department. So we're not eliminating those positions, but we are reassigning those positions to value-added work that we really need to do within the Public Works Department. So that's going to be critical as we move forward.
Did you guys, for instance, what's the closest community to us that went mechanized? Did you guys do any investigation on feedback from them or anything like that? Was there you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. There are communities in Maine that are doing it, and Portland, for example, is doing it. So I'll say the technology's proven. The shift will be, which is you and I can no longer just put the trash bag out the side of the road. We will have to put it in a container, either a 30 or a 60. And so people are going to have to change their habits. Likewise, on some areas of internal town, rather than just having trash on both sides of the street, you have to move it to the other sides, so we aren't going up and down the street twice.
So there will be some issues that the public will have to.
No.
If we go with the
Speed bump.
mechanized
Yes,
approach,
to go with that.
that's right,
Yeah, there is a
But the
lot
town would purchase those containers.
yes.
Let me add that we have an opening in the Public Works Department now that we're not filling, waiting for this decision. I know throughout this, it's been commented that we may have 3 displaced employees, where we'll only have 2 that we can use for sewer. So if we go with the contracting out, we're not gonna have to absorb a person.
Right. Jerry, go ahead.
How much are the containers?
$65, roughly $65 a piece.
For the 64 gallon.
Yes, for the big one.
About the 31.
The 30, I can't remember that, but it's proportional. You know what I mean?
About half of it.
I think it's 45 or
The
something.
first one,
It's half.
if I'm correct, is gonna be provided free of charge.
Right.
So now, if someone needs a second one, they'll have to pay for it.
Yes. And these are, you know, if you go up to Home Depot, not place an ad for Home Depot, but any store has these containers. You know, I mean, you know, that there aren't anything that's strange or anything. It's a container with a lid, principally, square.
Keep the crows
And,
wildlife
you know,
out.
actually, there's a pretty good website, and I should have brought it with me, but if you go on this website, you know, actually the manufacturer of this equipment, there's some, you know, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You know, it shows you how it works, and it's not perfect, but it works. It's,
Well, perhaps we'll have to have some sort of a public meeting with,
Oh, yes.
with a demonstration of it.
Yes.
And it's gonna take a lot of public involvement if they wanna do it this way,
Right.
I think.
And-
They're a buy-in, so to speak.
and so principally, what we wanted to do tonight was to begin the discussion, because this is seemingly simple, but it isn't. And that but we're at a point where we need to move forward with one of these options, whichever one that is.
Option one really isn't an option. Oh, sorry. Option one really isn't an option. It's 3 and 5, right? Okay.
So back to, the automated one with the arm and the drop. What happens if the vehicle breaks down?
We've got an issue. That's part of the cons,
Yeah,
because
okay.
we'll be number one.
Now, you don't get garbage collection that week, right?
Well, that's an issue. There's no question about it.
Paul, could you, would you be able to, do you want to add anything to this? I know you probably don't, but maybe you're going to be in on the discussion eventually anyway, so. We discussed the backup. What's our backup plan now? The mechanical, would be the contractor,
Backup plan is to buy 2 trucks,
right?
and they're not cheap. Because other than that, you really have no option to pick up trash. To try to get the containers manually is pretty difficult.
So once we go to the containers, there's no going back, because you're not gonna go pick those containers up and put them into a packer truck that we're using now and just have it packed somewhere. That won't be
You'd have to
allowed.
set up our existing truck with the manual tippers, and
Yeah.
then you gotta put a crew back out there.
Yeah.
It's pretty much all or nothing, I think, if you go mechanized.
How far away is the manufacturer of these things? I mean, is there shop, do they have used units on site that we can rent if ours broke down? I guess those are things we're all gonna have
Our
to mention and
manufacturer,
discuss.
our preference, the dealer we've been dealing with is out of Bangor, but I don't believe, that they have a truck on hand. The manufacturers, unless they got more than one place, is out of Florida, which we've gotten parts for our truck before out of there. In a couple, 3 or 4 days, we can get it. I mean, they're very responsive. They're pretty good for service, but you're still, I mean, I just lost a radiator right now. We've been down for a week. Because the truck, nobody had a radiator in the country for that truck, so we had to have one built. So I've spent probably $5,000 renting a truck since last Tuesday, I believe, plus a record call, so. My preference, I just as soon get out of the trash business and deal with public works, but that's your call.
For option 5?
Yes.
That was the next question. Okay.
Of course, the advantage of option 5 is it's transparent to the customer. They see no difference.
That's the case where we would contract for the pickup, it's not the customer would be doing an individual
Correct.
contract, correct?
Yes. And I'm assuming they would keep our routes and.
As much as possible. I mean, they may be in the same boat that we are going to be hauling to Norwalk, because even if we continue doing it ourselves, we're probably gonna have to adjust routes, because Norwalk closes at 3:30 in the afternoon. So that means I may not get all my trash in on one day before I have to go up and dump. So we may have to split the route into 5 days instead of 4, and we haven't gotten that far, but time tells us if we don't leave here by 2:30 in the afternoon to get up there, we're not gonna dump that day. Some days we do get done early. Mondays, like today, is a heavy day, so we usually do a load and a half. So the contractor may end up changing his route. He may put 2 trucks out on Monday, you know, and try to get it done sooner. I guess that would be his option as, you know, as a contractor.
Did you vote as a committee? Did you vote which option you wanted?
No.
in the
We,
meeting?
we voted to present the 3 options.
Oh, okay.
We took the easy way out.
You know,
And, you know, if I could, you know, the reason for that was because every one of these options has got plus and minuses to it. And that trying to sort through that at the committee level without getting input from the council. And so really what the intent was saying, folks, here is what
Homework.
here is what we're talking about, and that we're at that point, so certainly we didn't expect a firm decision coming out of the council tonight, but we, you know, that we're gonna have to have more discussions with the council.
Would you expect the resolution as early as next month, or are we
I would
waiting?
hope,
Okay, so we're gonna have first reading next month on these,
right.
which option we want.
And so what the idea would be is that if the council wants more discussion, we may have to have a special meeting.
Yes, sir.
Back again, on option 5, contracting that out, trash collection. How long did that contract, how long would that contract be good for?
We're talking about a 5-year agreement.
Then what happens after 5 years?
Hopefully we renegotiate.
you gotta remember too that, you know, option 5 is 150,000, is a very expensive option. It's 150
more than
more,
what we're spending
just
now.
initially, yes, than now. And that goes up, you know, that's just, sure that's the first time might be an average of 5 years, but it goes up like a certain amount every year.
And once
For the, if I remember with the contract.
And once we as a town get rid of our apparatus for picking up garbage, and we start renegotiating the second contract, you wonder if it's not gonna go up even more.
Right.
Because we wouldn't have many options except for other companies. I mean, that's the only option we'd be able to do at that time.
You know, the only positive to also option 5 is that the perk money can be used to offset some of that
To offset
cost
some of that.
over the course of, like, if you take 150, if we're getting 600, for the first 4 years, it'll be pretty much neutral as far as cost.
That money will go away.
Eventually,
Yeah,
the
they'll come
savings,
back.
yes, it's not
Yep.
coming back. You gotta look at where you wanna use that, you know what I mean, that money, you know.
I think what people have to understand too is the favorable deal we had with PERC on our garbage disposal was unrealistic, I guess. And in the real world, we're gonna pay more for garbage disposal now that's closed.
Yeah.
That was a good operation.
If I may, just one last
what?
comment.
No, actually, it's less,
Oh, it is, okay.
Yeah.
because of freight primarily.
Because of freight, yes, going to bank, okay.
You know, the whole thing that we talked about during this last 2 years too was recycle was talked about tremendous amount is, you know, because recycle reduces the amount of waste that you put to the landfill. But lately, recycling hasn't been that cost effective. So, you know, there's not gonna, but it's always better to recycle. And I think, and Ken said and Mike said that we don't plan on not doing recycling. I think we'll set up a separate committee, and that committee will look into the recycling options again. One of the things that the committee came up with, which was very great, was the school food recycling program. So that we are recycling now food waste, and it's being picked up, I think, every week,
Yeah, the elementary school.
in elementary school, so
Being
that's
turned
been,
into- been turned into gas, isn't it?
Twice a week, it's making electricity.
Making
yeah,
electricity.
so, you know, that was, and, you know, using that committee to enhance those type of things, and to get the waste down, and to recycle where practical, I think is very important, and making it user-friendly, I think that's gonna be the key.
So it sounds like what I will do is schedule a special council meeting so we can sit down and spend some time on this, okay? So I will do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tomorrow?
You might not be invited, but.
But you wanna order the new truck, do you?
Yeah.
Well,
Be invited.
I'm short a man right now, and I've got a bad truck, so
I know.
kind of being pushed in the corner, so appreciate it.
Sure.
A long time ago, when we first moved here, which was in about 1960, we were given blue plastic recyclable bins. Are we still going to be able to use those? Because I have them at home.
You can use them if you want to bring your stuff up to the library.
Oh yeah, I bring them up to the library all the time. I've been doing that for ages.
We're not picking it up curbside, and
No, but I mean, when you do pick it up curbside, are those containers going to be usable?
I don't think we're going to be picking.
No,
I don't think we're going to be picking up recycling curbside.
Oh, okay.
I could be wrong.
At one time, we tried to experiment for a couple of years, I believe, but we picked up.
Take a picture of the arm picking up the trash and throwing it in there, and the trash goes out.
Yeah, but I like the idea that they could do it over the floors. We all sat then on the reports of committees and commissions. And then we have department reports, finance committee reports, and the financial report. I'll entertain a motion to accept our reports. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Move on to table business. Was there one you wanted to take off the table
Yes.
tonight?
Well, actually, Mr. Chairman, I'd like for you to leave ordinance number 16 on the table. I'm still working with the town attorney on that one.
Okay.
And resolution number 5, I'd appreciate if you could leave that on the table. We'd like to do that at the next council meeting.
So I'll entertain a motion to take order number 18 off the table. Pardon?
Yes,
Okay.
motion.
So we're up to providing an order calling for a special election on March 13th, 2018. I'll entertain a motion to accept, to open discussion.
So moved.
Moved, is there a second? Okay, up for discussion is order number 18, 2017. And this is due to the school dissolution, right?
Yes.
That's all we have to worry
Dissolving
about.
the
this one.
AOS 92.
Is this the second reading?
Yes.
And you don't have to have a special
No
election
special election.
for this position.
Nope. Any discussion?
Yes, if you could, Mr. Chairman, I would think, hope, that the school board would present some type of information as to what that really means and how's that gonna materialize. So I know that you're working on it, but certainly before the voters go in on March 13th, you know, I bet you 90% of the people in Winslow isn't even aware of it. So those that do show up, hopefully will have some information to say, this is what it means. These are the positives and pros and cons and so forth. That would be a request.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think the superintendent is working on
Yes.
putting together
That's
a
correct.
informational meeting, okay.
For all three communities, yes.
Good. Any further discussion on order 18, 2017? Is that a roll call vote?
Yes.
Okay, we'll have a roll call vote, if there's no further discussion.
Ben Twitchell?
Yes.
Patricia West?
Yes.
Jerry Kurian?
Yes,
Ray Garrett?
Yes.
Ken Fletcher?
Yes.
Steve Russell?
Yes.
And Steve Adams.
Yeah, I don't know, missing it. I'm missing, there we go. So now we move on to new business. We'll begin with ordinance number 1, 2018. An ordinance providing for the amendment to the Winslow zoning map to rezone the entire lot owned by Don Pruitt on tax map 16, lot 60, China Road, from the high-density residential district to the mixed-use district. Be ordained by the town council of the town of Winslow as follows. Whereas Don Pruitt owns a lot on the town, in the town of Winslow, shown on the town of Winslow tax map 16, lot 60, which is located in the high-density residential district. This lot borders the mixed-use district, and whereas Mr. Pruitt wishes to have his property rezoned to be included in the mixed-use district, and whereas the Winslow Planning Board recommends this parcel located on map 16, lot 60 be rezoned by extending the mixed-use district to include this entire parcel. Now therefore be it ordained by the town council that such property owned by Don Pruitt on tax map 16, lot 60, China Road, be rezoned as mixed-use district, and the Winslow zoning map be so amended.
so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded, open for discussion. Come right up to me.
Yes, my name is Don Plord, and it is actually not owned by Don Plord, it's owned by Pondwood LLC. So I just wanted to make sure that got clarified, and I am a member of the Pondwood LLC, and we do that. We'd like to put some storage units there like we have on the Veteran Drive and Dunbar Road, and we try to run a neat operation. We think we could be a great neighbor there, so that's all. I just want to clarify the name.
Okay,
Thank you.
Any comment?
It was approved by planning board. It was approved by planning board, yeah.
It was, okay. Is there any discussion? I assume neighbors will have been or will be notified of this proposed change, and we'll have a public hearing next month?
Yes, we will do that
Before the next meeting, every neighbor will know about it, right?
Yes, the abutters.
The abutters, yep.
Question,
Yes.
since it's owned by Don Plord on tax map 16/60, will that have to be changed, amended?
As far as it being owned by Pondwood LLC?
Yes.
Yes, if someone could make a motion to amend, then it-
Entertain a motion to amend,
So move.
to replace Don Plord with Pondwood LLC. Moved, and is there a second?
Second.
Moving the second, open for discussion on the amendment to ordinance number 1. Seeing no discussion, do we have to have a roll call on the amendment?
Well,
No?
there's a couple of places in there that has to be done.
Well, anywhere it says Don Plord, it will just be replaced with Pondwood LLC. Is there any further discussion on the amendment to the ordinance? If not, all in favor of the amendment, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. So now we're back to ordinance number 1, 2018 as amended. Is there any further discussion? Go ahead.
The comment I would make, Mr. Chairman, that seems to be consistent with what's occurring in that area as well, that that we talked last council meeting about some properties on that lower end. And the way that is geographically laid out, I don't think would impede the residential character of what's left. That's my opinion.
Yes, Trish.
They're very professional looking and clean, so I don't think it would be an eyesore at all. It would look really nice in that area.
Storage units?
Yeah. I rent one from Don, or Pondwood LLC, however you want to say it.
Okay, if everybody's all set, we'll have a roll call vote on ordinance number 18.
Tricia West?
Excuse me,
Yes.
ordinance number 1.
Jerry Kurian?
Yes.
Ray Karen?
Yes.
Ken Fletcher?
Yes.
Ben Twitchell?
Yes.
Steve Russell?
Yes. And so next month will be a public hearing, and the land abutters will have been notified.
Can I make a motion, we take 6, 2018, 7, 2018, and 8, 2018 together?
It's been moved to take those three
Second.
together. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Resolution 6, 2018 is an application for a restaurant license. 7 is application for a restaurant license. And 8 is the application for a restaurant license. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Now we'll move back to order number 1, 2018. An order providing for authorization to take emergency action to protect approximately 50 feet of sewer line adjacent to Cedar Brook at a total cost not to exceed $95,000. Be it ordered by the Town Council of the Town of Winslow as follows. Whereas approximately 50 feet of public storm drain consisting of Cedar Brook on the south side of Halifax Street collapsed. And whereas the collapse created a sinkhole and exposed the town's sewer line. And whereas the Public Works Director has received an estimate of $95,000 for the project. Now therefore, be it ordered by the Town Council of the Town of Winslow that authorization is given for emergency action to be taken to protect the approximately 50 feet of sewer line adjacent to Cedar Brook at the total cost not to exceed $95,000. And be it further ordered that the project will be funded from the sewer department capital account. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded, open for discussion.
Mr. Chairman, when the time comes, I'd appreciate if we could waive the second reading.
Because, you know,
It's already done.
Mr. Chairman, because the work's done.
What's that?
You know, that, and I do want to comment, I think that the action of the Public Works and all that team to get that together, and I can't remember the date, but, you know, I think they really did a good job of
Avoided a
getting
potential
people together.
disaster. If that
To
sewer
avoid it.
line had broken,
Hmm.
we would be looking at a lot bigger disaster than this. Jerry?
Well, a lot of confidence.
Sure.
Oh, thank you. The fire department, I remember just a comment, the fire department showing up and they were like, we don't know how to fix this. We don't even, what do we do? We don't even have the tools or anything. It was a very large sinkhole, so I agree with what Ken says.
Jerry?
All right, this is if I'm correct, this is just a temporary fix.
We fixed the part that collapsed.
Right.
There are further areas, further upstream, for the lack of a better word, that look like are facing the same fate. Is that the way to put it?
Yeah, the sewer line itself, the work that was done on the sewer line is permanent. Now we've got to focus on the storm drain to figure out how we're gonna address that, and what sections will get replaced and what sections might get left open as an open drainage.
Next question, are we gonna be able to get some federal funds or state funds?
Well, DOT is gonna participate with us as far as any work that we do on Halifax Street.
In the right of way, probably?
Yes, and southerly of that, heading towards the river. But at some point, I'll look to see what might be available for funding to do the part that's north of Halifax. Hopefully, we'll be able to find something.
Hopefully it doesn't collapse.
Right, in the meantime.
Those houses would go into a sinkhole on that side of the road. Anybody else? We all set? Is that a roll call also? Okay, so if there's no further discussion, we'll have a, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm all set, we'll do a second reading.
Yeah, let's do the first reading first.
Yeah.
Roll call on the first reading of order number 1, 2018.
Ray Karen?
Yes.
Patricia Webb?
Yes.
Ben Twitchell?
Yes.
Ken Fletcher?
Yes.
Jerry Kurian?
Yes.
Steve Russell?
Yes. Now, we would entertain a motion to waive the second reading.
moved.
Moved and seconded to waive the second reading. Any discussion? If not, we'll have a roll call vote on waiving the second reading.
Ray Karen?
Yes.
Patricia Webb?
Yes.
Ben Twitchell?
Yes.
Ken Fletcher?
Yes.
Jerry Kurian?
Yes.
Steve Russell?
Yes. Moving on to Resolution 9, 2018, resolution providing for the withdrawal and dissolving of the Waterville-Winslow Joint Solid Waste Disposal Facility Corporation. Be it resolved by Town Council of the Town of Winslow as follows. Whereas the Waterville-Winslow Solid Waste Disposal Facility Corporation has not been functioning for a few years and its purpose no longer exists. Now, therefore, be resolved by Town Council of the Town of Winslow that the Town of Winslow hereby withdraws from and dissolves the Waterville-Winslow Joint Solid Waste Disposal Facility Corporation, and directs that the remaining funds in account of said corporation are to be distributed 1/2 to Waterville and 1/2 to Winslow.
So moved.
Moved and seconded, open for discussion.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, some of you probably recall when Waterville and Winslow came together and actually ran a recycling facility. That facility was sold, and the funds were put into an account where they sat actually for many years. And so now we feel it's prudent to go ahead and dissolve that, our corporation, and divide the money between Waterville and Winslow. So each community would get $17,000.
Is there any further discussion? If there's no further discussion, all in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. We now move on to Resolution 10, 2018. A resolution providing for authorization of Orion Rope Works to sublease 15,000 square feet of space in the town's industrial building to Johnny's Selected Seeds. Be it resolved by Town Council of Town Winslow as follows. Whereas Johnny's Selected Seeds is in need of an additional 15,000 square feet of space in the town's industrial building. And whereas Orion Rope Works is leasing 15,000 square feet of space in the town industrial building that they do not need. Now therefore, be resolved by Town Council of Town Winslow that Orion Rope Works is hereby authorized to sublease 15,000 square feet of space in the town's industrial building to Johnny's Selected Seeds.
So moved.
Yeah. Moved and seconded, open for discussion. We all set? All in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. That takes care of everything. Now, discussion items.
You know, if you could, Mr. Chairman, I would request we take a break,
Okay,
2-minute break.
5-minute break, 2-minute break. Thank you.
I go home.
Bye, Paul.
Back to order. Thank you. Now, under items of discussion, we'll begin with a climate change resolution. If you would want to step up.
Hello.
Hi.
I think you all know me, but I am Peter Garrett. I live on the Eames Road in Winslow. And though I'm obviously not from here, I had the good fortune to marry a girl from Winslow, and we're living on the same 100 acres that I was on when she was raised as a little girl. Some of you may know that when early on in my career here in Maine, I became the state's first hazardous waste hydrogeologist. I'm a scientist, and I went on to have a small company that dealt with groundwater contamination from gasoline stations, and also getting to develop water supplies, not for Winslow, because Winslow has a perfectly good one in China Lake, but for Portland and for Castine, amongst others. So that's who I am. I'm also a fiscal conservative by nature. I don't like spending money unreasonably, and I like things to be fair. And this is coming up in what I'm going to say next. So recently I followed Senator Susan Collins when she addressed the Senate in October. I don't know if you remember that. She was talking about the Government Accounting Office report on the costs of climate change enhanced weather events. Those big hurricanes that we all heard about, the devastating hurricanes and floods way bigger than anything they'd ever seen in I guess Houston, and then over a period of years, a drought in California followed by very heavy rains, and then, of course, wildfires. And there were a total of 17 such events that cost the taxpayers more than $1 million for each in recovery. The total cost for 2017 was $306 billion. So that's a big number, and we have difficulty getting around such big numbers. But I did a little math, and I divided the 306 billion by the population of the US, which is 325 million. Turns out that each of us, men, women, and children, are contributing about $941 towards the recovery from these events. And of course, doing a little bit more math, if you really want it, if you multiply that by the population of Winslow, that's about 7 million for recovery of these 17 events, because none of which affected us locally. Okay, because you could say that hurricanes and wildfires have happened before and will happen again. The fact is that the great majority of climate scientists say that climate change is here. It does increase the size and intensity of weather events. It is caused by humans and is primarily the result of increasing CO2 emissions from burning fossil fuels, carbon fuels. The unfairness I don't like is that some people will experience climate changes much harsher than others. And that applies to our kids and grandkids more than us. It also applies to some people in different parts of the world. People who live in low-lying areas near the coast will be severely impacted by rising sea levels, which are already happening, particularly, I don't know if you hear stories from Miami. People in hurricane-prone states are likely to experience increasingly violent storms because the violence is based upon the temperature of the ocean, which is decreasing. So we in Maine experience impacts, for instance, with, ticks. The warmer oceans have already shifted the lobster population north, and in the next couple of decades, the lobsters may move out of Maine. Worst of all, however, climate change is not a static thing. In other words, one can't just say, okay, there's climate change and we can adapt to it, that should be okay. It's a trajectory that we're on. It's increasing. So long as we continue pumping CO2 into the air, it will get worse. And it's already affecting the economy. I've just given you those numbers. And worse will come, according to Senator Collins. From her reading of the GAO report, she noted that the total recovery from extreme weather events will soon exceed 6 trillion. Another huge number that's hard to get your head around. I'm coming before you today, asking you to consider a conservative economic solution to climate change. And it's called carbon fee and dividend, and I think you got papers on it there. So carbon fee and dividend was developed by none other than George Shultz, who was the Secretary of the Treasury to President Reagan. And as also, you probably read the essay by Milton Friedman, and if he were alive, it's likely that his policy would be similar. In other words, tax the things that you don't want to get too much of. Basically, carbon fee and dividend imposes a steadily rising fee on carbon fuels based on their CO2 emissions. The cost would rise each year, but regularly. About 1,000 companies, owners of coal mines, oil wells, and gas wells, would pay that fee. They would increase their prices, but the fee is being imposed to internalize the cost of air pollution, which includes CO2 emissions. All the money from the fee would come back to citizens in equal shares as a monthly dividend. That's the plan. I'm not saying that Congress will pass it exactly like that, but that's the plan, as George Shultz just laid it out. Raising the fee would soon do away with all of the subsidies, because it would keep rising and rising, both to carbon fuels as well as the subsidies to solar and wind. They wouldn't be necessary anymore, or any other source of clean energy that gets invented. In addition, there would be a border adjustment to protect American companies, whether they're either exporting or competing with products from a country that has no price on carbon fuels. I don't know if you see how that works, but if there were a country A that didn't have a price on carbon fuels, was making things that we could make here in this country cheaper, they would pay a tariff when they came into the country. So pretty soon every country in the world would take the lead from America because that country A would think, well, wait a minute, why am I paying a tariff to America if I could have a fee on carbon fuels in my country? So the thought is that it would pretty soon take a lead. Without carbon fee and dividend, and we carry on as we have been, and our kids and grandkids will be the ones unfairly experiencing our foresight. With carbon fee and dividend, a whole new industrial revolution based on other energy sources, not these carbon fuels. Clean energy sources can be expected. Our modelling of the plan shows that within 20 years, CO2 emissions would go down by half. 2.8 million new jobs will be created, and the GDP will grow. There will also be a bonus for, of course, cleaner air. And 70% of the people in the country, those the ones with the lower incomes, would come ahead with the dividend, would come out ahead with the dividend. So we've been in this kind of situation before, where people complained that in order to clean up the air and water, the costs would increase and industry would suffer. For instance, before I came to Winslow, I understand that the Kennebec was pretty darn messy, and the air was not clean here, I guess in Winslow, and there were concerns that industry would fail if we did something about it. Well, we did something about it, and industry did not fail. This is back in the 70s. In the case of carbon fee and dividend, the role of industry is crucial. What we're looking for is a free market, not where the costs of CO2 emissions are kind of hidden. They go away just for free. Those industries that understand that the fee on carbon fuels is a steadily rising fee will, which is intended to encourage the use of clean fuels, not carbon fuels, will work to shift to those to clean fuels. Their products will arrive in the market at a lower cost from those from other industries that don't take that warning. The free market will be working, and the polluting industries will hurt most. It follows, in fact, the essay that I put in there in your package from Milton Friedman. So to conclude, I'm asking you, Winslow Town Council, to follow the town of Fairfield and also Bangor and Portland in endorsing carbon fee and dividend and urging Congress to take your lead. I'll close by saying something that I've learned since I came to Maine that I rather like. That is, the state's motto is, I lead. There we go. We need to take a lead with this, and thanks to Senator Collins, we have already taken a first step there. I'm asking you to take the next step for the town of Winslow. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? So could we have that on that resolution on next month's agenda too? Would that be the plan?
If that's what you'd like.
And that would take 2 readings and a public hearing?
If it's a resolution, it will only take 1 reading.
If it's a resolution, it takes 1. Okay. If that's agreeable to you guys, we'll put it on next meeting's agenda for discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
What time would that be for a discussion? Would it be at the end of a meeting like this?
No.
No, it would come up under new business. So it'd be right after the committees, and it'd be come up under new business. It would be a
Okay.
new resolution. Right
Okay.
after the committees and the town manager's report and all that.
Thank you.
Public hearing. There would be a public hearing for this, it's a resolution. No? Okay. Next item up for discussion is the town charter review. And that was in your report, right, Mike?
Yes, yes. So We should have reviewed that in 2015 and then every 5 years thereafter. And of course, the review is to look at it to see if any changes are necessary. So we could put together a small committee of maybe 2 or 3 to just look that over if you wanted.
Mr. Chairman, and that committee would bring it back to the council
With recommended
and
changes.
with full public
Is that,
participation.
would that committee consist of just council members, or would we have community members on there?
It's up to the council, we can certainly add some.
I'm not sure going through the details of the charter, or if that's something. No, I don't know, it's just something to think about, I guess, so we'll try to put together a committee then, right?
Yeah.
Does anybody wanna volunteer right now to serve on that committee, or am I just gonna sign it?
How many do you want?
I don't know what kind of a committee this would take. I don't remember the last one that we did. We had some changes, some minor changes, right? That we had to put out the vote. Every time you change the charter, you have to.
Right, so it depends on the changes. You know, if we wanted to change like the number of counselors or, that would require a charter commission. So the question is, are we looking at just making minor changes? Or would they be major changes? So I would suggest that perhaps we put together a small committee that would take the first overview, and then if they come back and say, look, we're thinking that there may be more considerable changes, then we would need to form a charter commission, and the charter commission could then delve into it and look at it.
So the first committee would be more of an overview. A little bit of
That would be my
yeah,
recommendation.
makes sense.
And if you could, if I understand, the charter commission would be made up of council plus public, right?
It could be. Oh, I'm
Could
sorry.
be.
Yes, the
Charter
charter
commission
commission would be,
would be,
yes.
yes.
Right.
Yes, yes, that's correct.
Okay, I'll wait then. That's fine. I'll wait till CBD later on.
So Ken and Jerry.
How many more?
Anybody who wants to, go to meetings, and I'll try to go. Because Mike, you'll probably be.
You know what would be helpful, if you had a meeting, you just included all the council members, so
On
that
that
if
CC,
people wanted
yeah.
to come in and out, that would be beneficial
I think so,
I think
yeah.
that would be beneficial for input.
Yeah.
We can do that.
Okay.
You got one problem with that. If all council members are part of that committee, we gotta, you're gonna have it open, but you gotta advertise it.
Well, they wouldn't be part of the committee, but they might just show up to listen to the
Right.
committee.
No, that's
They'd
not
be
a
part of the
problem.
public.
They'd be part of the public, so to
Problem.
speak.
That's fine.
Okay, the next item is comprehensive plan. Every 10 years, it's recommended that we revisit our comprehensive plan. And this would be the 10th year, this year. When we did it before, we had some council, planning board members, and we had members of the public
Yeah, that's right.
involved in that. So it's time for us to
Oh
go
my
through
gosh, this
that.
is like the volunteer meeting. You want more people
It's time for us to go through
volunteer.
that process
That's what you
again.
get paid the big bucks for.
So if the council would like,
$45.
I could find out who was interested, and maybe at the next council meeting, come up with a list,
Yep, and talk to the planning board too.
talk to the planning board and see
I
who
say we
might
just
be
pick from the
interested.
audience. Just pick members from the audience.
Or
You,
just
you,
pick
you.
them.
Is that?
You
is that
hate
a-
them that much?
No, I appreciate them staying to the very end. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. So,
On the town charter review, can we do the same thing that you just suggested for the comprehensive plan? In other words, get a list for the next meeting of the council, and then we can,
We could, but I would suggest maybe we take this first overview first,
yeah,
just to see if there's gonna be substantive changes.
A quick look might decide that we don't need many changes at all.
Right,
Or
right,
maybe we need a bigger commission.
correct.
And so do that triage.
Yep.
right?
So I will present potential members for a comprehensive plan committee. And that's it. The next item is executive session.
Trish,
oh, sorry. Yep.
Oh,
Motion to enter into executive session.
Oh, no.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Kyle.
Is your discussion allowing other topics to be discussed that aren't on your list, or is it limited to those three?
Well, if you could,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, we can listen to anything, I guess. I think the thing I always like to do is make sure it's included in the agenda if possible, just so if we get into a topic that may be controversial and is not publicly in the agenda, somebody could complain that we're discussing things outside. That's the only reason. Now, if it's a topic you want to put on the agenda, that's fine.
My thoughts are stimulated by sitting here listening to one of your earlier discussions, and it's not school-related.
No, but what I'm saying, if there's a topic that you want us to consider, we could decide to either consider it tonight or use discretion to put it on the agenda next time.
You got a couple minutes, 1 or 2 maybe? You better speak fast.
Kyle Price, 147 Clinton Avenue. So my thoughts were stimulated by your conversation about your committee on the waste options. And I certainly appreciate the work of committee, and I appreciate Mrs. Morrison's thanks for the work that the school committee's done. That's my only reference to school work and school committee. And I certainly appreciate your public works director, our public works director. I haven't found anything about what's going on in that department that I could complain about. In fact, I think waste pickup in this town is a luxury from where it is I grew up. So changing that is probably going to take some more. In terms of recycling, I, again, don't know what kind of conversation you've had around that. I think one way you're going to address that is to charge. I think that's a tremendous opportunity up there where those bins are to be located. And I reduce as much of my trash just because I want to. But my father is the first selectman in Freedom, has been for a number of years. My brother is the public works director of the town of Freedom, employee base of 2. But it's a growing public works department for this reason. They were subcontracting their waste disposal out to a private contractor for a number of years. And in the end, they went and bought their own truck, used some of their own personal expertise. Their family's pretty handy. Rebuilt a body, did all that work, and have saved a substantial amount of money because they were basically being overcharged for their tipping fees because the contractor was picking up trash for multiple towns. And there was no way to know how much of your truck was from the town of Freedom and how much of your truck was from the neighboring town. And so when they were taking their own truck to the scale, they realized substantial savings. So I guess my ultimate point is a service like that I hate to see leave the direct control of your departments. I don't like the sounds of the option of contracting out. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So next committee on solid waste. or recycling, you just volunteered for.
I did. Cal knows everything about trash.
2 years of trash.
We have some pretty interesting conversations at home when it does come to all of our roles. Sometimes we have to go out to the garage. My mother will kick us out.
I was going to say, do they need a used truck to buy?
They've always looked at your stuff when it shows up on the lots after you've used it, plow trucks and stuff. You know it's been taken care of.
Thank you.
Joe, when's the next school board meeting?
26.
26.
6 o'clock. Thank you for your time.
Am I good?
Thank you.
Thank you, Val.
Motion to enter into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA subsection 4056A, personnel matters.
Is there a second?
Have a good evening.
Someone? Okay, thank you. So someone seconded my motion.
We did.